Good evening, students. So, well, okay. So, a lot of people have uh, questions. Good evening, Tanushri. Good evening, Sushil. Yes, some question over here. Namaste, Mohammed Yaqib. Namaste. Okay. Somebody's raised their hand. If you have any queries, you can start by asking your queries. Yes, good evening. There are a lot of chapters to get covered in this session. Registration, tax invoice, credit note, and debit notes. Yes, Tanu Vishwakarma, you have any queries, you can unmute and ask, please.
गुड इवनिंग सर।
Good evening.
सर प्रीवियस बैच में जो सप्लायर और रिसिपिएंट का आईटीसी क्लेम करने का आपने एक्सप्लेन किया था, तो उसमें जो डबल टैक्सेशन का गवर्नमेंट को बेनिफिट हो रहा था वो कॉन्सेप्ट क्लियर नहीं हुआ।
आपकी आवाज ठीक से नहीं आ रही है।
सर गवर्नमेंट को डबल टैक्सेशन का बेनिफिट कैसे होगा
हाँ,
जब रिसिपिएंट 180 डेज के बाद भी पेमेंट नहीं करता है तो?
करेक्ट। तो आपने वो ट्रांजैक्शन समझ लिया ना कि जब एक सप्लायर रिसीवर को सप्लाई करता है, ठीक है, तो
यस सर।
सप्लायर जब सेल करेगा कुछ गुड्स रिसीवर को, सप्लायर के थ्रू गवर्नमेंट को टैक्स मिल रही है।
यस
करेक्ट।
सर।
अब गवर्नमेंट को टैक्स मिल गई है तो इसका क्रेडिट रिसीवर को मिलना चाहिए।
हाँ।
अब रिसीवर को क्रेडिट डिनाई कर दिया जा रहा है और उसको बोल दिया गया कि तुमने जो क्रेडिट लिया है वो रिवर्स करो।
यस सर।
तो फिर रिवर्स करने का मतलब क्या हुआ? उसका टैक्स एक्स्ट्रा पे करना पड़ेगा।
सर जब रिसीवर आईटीसी रिवर्स कर देगा
हम्म।
देन फिर 180 डेज के बाद वो पेमेंट अगेन करेगा सप्लायर को, तो
अगर
फिर
पेमेंट
सप्लायर अगेन टैक्स वो गवर्नमेंट को देगा।
करेक्ट, तो तब तक के लिए तो गवर्नमेंट को डबल टैक्स मिल रहा है ना।
तो
तो
डबल टैक्सेशन, तो एक बार तो आईटीसी रिवर्स हो गया ना सर।
आईटीसी रिवर्स होना ही टैक्स पेमेंट है ना। अगर मैं एक इंस्टेंस लीजिए कि मैं पेमेंट ही नहीं करता हूँ पार्टी को, तब तो मुझे
यस सर।
रिवर्स करना ही पड़ेगा और फिर उसका क्रेडिट मुझे कभी भी मिलेगा ही नहीं।
हाँ।
तो फिर उस केस में तो डबल टैक्स तो हुआ ही है। और मतलब जो भी मैं बैड डेट्स करता हूँ उसका मुझे बेनिफिट मिलेगा ही नहीं। करेक्ट।
ओके ओके सर।
तो इस एंगल से बैड डेट्स में तो क्रेडिट मिलेगा ही नहीं। और अगर मैं डिले पेमेंट भी करता हूँ तब इंटरिम पीरियड के लिए तब तक मैं पे करूंगा, उस तक तो वो अमाउंट गवर्नमेंट के पास रहेगी। वो मेरे को क्रेडिट रूप में फिर से दे देंगे जब मैं पेमेंट कर दूंगा, लेकिन उस ड्यूरेशन के लिए गवर्नमेंट के पास एक्स्ट्रा टैक्सेस है जो रहना नहीं चाहिए।
ओके सर, थैंक यू।
ओके, निश्चला, यू आर आस्किंग ऑन, please explain on buy more save more in stock. Okay, so buy more save more is an option wherein if you buy more number of goods you will get more discount. Correct. So if your purchase turnover is more, then your discount also is more. That is the concept of buy more save more, wherein you buy more and you get more credit or you get more discount. So that is where the discount has to be applied in the such scenario. Any other queries? Okay. Next question. Okay. So we'll get into the concept of registration. Let's understand the concept of registration. Why registration is required? It is a fundamental requirement for identification of a taxpayer. Who is a taxpayer? Whether he is located at which place, to identify these things, registration is required. Okay, so these are the basic things which any tax authority will do it. If you have to register under a private limited company, okay, there also you have to give your address, because your address is very important to identify, to locate you. That's the reason these things are important. So any kind of compliance under the GST law also starts with registration. And it is a first step towards being GST compliant. Your clients, when you grow up, they would want to be GST compliant, right? They want to file their returns on time. To file the returns on time, they'll have to do first thing first is they'll have to get a registration done. Excuse me. Why GST registration? So once we understood the basics, from a law perspective, why registration is essential is because it will legally recognize a person as a supplier. Once he registers, only then he can collect taxes, which means that what? There is a threshold limit, right? Now, once you touch this threshold limit, you'll have to register. Now, if I have crossed this threshold limit and I've not registered, what will be the implication? Am I liable to pay GST or no? Now, we know that threshold limit for registration is 20 lakhs generally for services and 40 lakhs for goods. Now, if I have touched this limit, say I am a dealer in furnitures, my threshold limit is 40 lakhs. For the past 2 years, my threshold was below 40 lakhs. This year, it has become 60 lakhs. Now, I have not registered. So, what will be the implication of the GST? If I'm not registered, should I not pay the tax? Or how is it? Did you all get my question? Compulsory get registered under GST and pay tax. Okay, what you're saying is right. I have to get compulsory registered. Now I'm not registered. Neha, if I'm not registered, then what are the repercussions? If he is not registered and he also not collect GST on sale, okay? But my question is, will the government collect taxes or should he pay taxes to the government or no? That is my question. Okay, you're saying compulsory registered, and Neha is telling that yes, he has to pay. Okay, how will he pay then? He is not liable to pay. Okay, Sumit is saying he's not liable to pay. No ITC. Okay, ITC will come to it, Nistala, later. We are just saying that on the output, what 40 lakhs is the limit. Now he's made a sale of 60 lakhs. At least up till 40 lakhs, we know that there is no GST registration. Up to that amount, he will not be required to pay. Now, for the differential of 20 lakhs, will he have to pay output tax or no? Can the government say you're not registered, so it's okay, no need to pay? Or should he pay? And how will he pay? No claim ITC, fine. Everybody is giving that answer of the third point because I mentioned here that you cannot claim any credit of tax. Fine. I will not claim the credit. I am agreeing to that. But on the differential of 20 lakh rupees, should I pay tax or no? Very true, Mohammed Yaqib, that section 22 applies. He has to register. I agree. Now we are talking a step ahead, saying that should he pay taxes to the government or he should not pay? He should register himself. Now I'm saying that he's not registered. He should register is the law which we know, right? Now what happens? What is the implication if he doesn't register? Correct. So Nishtala and Sushil have given the correct answer. That the implication in such a scenario that they will have to pay taxes to the government. No respite is available that they cannot pay taxes to the government. Once you have crossed the threshold limit, which is for registration, even if you don't register, you have to pay taxes to the government. But what advantage you get once you register is you get the power to collect taxes from your customer. Okay. But if you are not registered, then you cannot collect taxes from your customer because that opportunity is gone. You have sold those goods, customer is gone, you have not collected from your customer, and you are gone and done the registration late. So in that cases, you will have to pay taxes to the government because you have crossed the threshold limit. ठीक है, आपको टैक्सेस तो भरना पड़ेगा लेकिन आप अपने कस्टमर से कलेक्ट नहीं कर सकते हो क्योंकि आपने रजिस्ट्रेशन नहीं लिया है. अगर आप रजिस्ट्रेशन लेते हो तो फिर आपका बेनिफिट क्या है? गवर्नमेंट को तो टैक्स भरना ही पड़ेगा. आप रजिस्ट्रेशन लो या फिर मत लो, आपका लिमिट क्रॉस हो गया है, थ्रेशोल्ड लिमिट, तब आपको पेमेंट तो करना ही पड़ेगा. अब सवाल ये उठ जाता है कि जो पेमेंट करोगे आप, वो आप अपने कस्टमर से कब कलेक्ट कर सकते हो? तभी कलेक्ट कर सकते हो जब आप रजिस्टर्ड हो, बिकॉज अनरजिस्टर्ड पर्सन के पास अथॉरिटी नहीं है जीएसटी कलेक्ट करने का. ठीक है, तो इसलिए हम ये से डिस्कस कर रहे थे. एंड वन ऑफ माय स्टूडेंट्स इन द प्रीवियस सेशन वेंट टू अ हॉस्पिटल एंड शी सेड दैट शी इंक्वायर्ड कि आप जीएसटी क्यों कलेक्ट कर रहे हो, क्या आपके पास रजिस्ट्रेशन है? आप तो हॉस्पिटल आप कलेक्ट नहीं कर सकते. उन्होंने कहा नहीं, हम लोग मेडिसिन बेचते हैं. हाँ, वो वाकिफ बात है कि मेडिसिन पे जीएसटी कलेक्ट करना चाहिए. देन शी वेंट अहेड एंड आस्क्ड कि आपका रजिस्ट्रेशन है? नहीं था उनके पास, एंड स्टिल दे वर कलेक्टिंग जीएसटी. सो इफ यू आर अवेयर ऑफ दिस, then you'll be able to advise and implement it everywhere, and you will be able to visualize things कि हाँ, अगर मैं किसी को जीएसटी पे कर रहा हूँ तो फर्स्ट आपकी नजर जाएगी कि whether he is registered under जीएसटी. फिर you will take the number what is mentioned in the invoice or the bill, and then you will cross check on your GST portal saying that whether the GST number is valid or it is invalid. ठीक है, so that's why collecting of the GST from the customer is possible only by a person who is having a registration. Only a registered person can collect taxes. Correct, Mr. Even if he is not registered, taxes should be paid. Okay, that was the relevance which I wanted to bring here. That everybody was saying that registration compulsory है, compulsory है. हाँ, compulsory है, लेकिन इंसान से ही गलती होती है, राइट? इफ इज नॉट टेकन रजिस्ट्रेशन, इम्प्लीकेशन क्या होगा? आप टैक्स भरिए, कोई दिक्कत नहीं है, आपने रजिस्ट्रेशन नहीं लिया है, आपको पेनाल्टी आएगा, लेकिन उससे ज्यादा है. पेनाल्टी तो मिनिमल अमाउंट है, लेकिन जो आपको टैक्स पे करना पड़ेगा, आपके जेब से पे करना पड़ेगा, आप अपने कस्टमर से फिर कलेक्ट नहीं कर पाओगे. ठीक है. एंड थर्ड ऑफ कोर्स इज आईटीसी क्रेडिट उसी को मिलता है जिसने रजिस्ट्रेशन लिया है, अनरजिस्टर्ड पर्सन को आईटीसी का क्रेडिट नहीं मिलेगा। यही बात हम बोलना चाहते हैं। डज इट मीन दैट अ पर्सन नॉट रजिस्टर्ड इज नॉट लायबल टू पे? ही इज स्टिल लायबल टू पे, but not entitled to collect, because the charging section says that there shall be levied a tax called GST and it shall be paid by the taxable person. Taxable person का definition क्या है? It includes any person who is registered or who is liable to be registered. A consultant with a turnover of rupees 50 lakhs is not registered. What will he do? What will he do? He will he will take the registration and collect the taxes. Registration ensures seamless flow of credit from supplier to the recipient at national level, and registration is PAN based. Okay. You have one PAN, right? PAN is not state specific. PAN is one PAN for any number of branches which you have, because it is for each entity, right? So if you take Reliance Industries, it has branches all across India. It will get only one PAN, right? But GST, you may have to take separate registration in each state where you operate from. If the Reliance Industries head office is in Mumbai, they will take registration in Mumbai and do supply interstate from there. But if they want to open a branch office or any kind of a warehouse in Karnataka, then they will have to take another registration in Karnataka. And when I say one registration, it doesn't mean one registration across all over India. It means one registration for all types of taxes, because we know we have CGST, SGST, IGST, CES, UTGST, all of that. You don't have to take separate registration under each of these separate laws. You can take one registration for all the laws. Okay. Correct. A consultant turnover, in that case, pay taxes on 30 lakhs. You're right. Registration conditions, as I had discussed, firstly, there's no centralized registration. You have to take registration in each state from where you are starting the supply. Register in every state from where he makes a taxable supply. Say a taxable turnover in Karnataka is 10 lakhs. Exempt turnover in Maharashtra is 30 lakhs. The aggregate turnover is 40 lakhs. So in this case, where will he take registration and where he will not take registration? This is say for a service. So he has a taxable turnover in Karnataka of 10 lakhs and a turnover in Maharashtra for exempt supply of 30 lakhs. Where will he take registration? So Neha Fatima is saying both Karnataka and Maharashtra. Pooja is saying only Karnataka. Mudit is saying Maharashtra. Anybody is saying no, neither, दोनों स्टेट में रजिस्ट्रेशन जरूरी नहीं है? Aggregate turnover सही है, लेकिन one important thing you guys have to note is register in every state from where he makes a taxable supply, even though his aggregate turnover is crossing the limits. But in a state where he is making only exempt supply, right? In this case, in Maharashtra, he is doing only exempt supply. So only in Karnataka he will register and not in Maharashtra. Okay, because you have to register only in that state from where you are making a taxable supply. But taxable supply in Karnataka is 10 lakhs. Your registration is required because aggregate turnover. For the purpose of aggregate turnover, we will consider even the exempt turnover of another state, because aggregate turnover जो लिमिट है that has to be considered all India basis. अगर all India basis में आपका turnover taxable exempt को मिला के क्रॉस करता है of 20 lakh rupees, then you will have to take registration. But अगर आप किसी स्टेट से only exempt turnover कर रहे हो तब वहां पे registration की जरूरत नहीं है. In Maharashtra, registration is not required. लेकिन अगर महाराष्ट्र में इफ इज डूइंग मेजरली एग्जाम सप्लाई और से एक 50 रुपीज 100 रुपीज का टैक्सेबल सप्लाई कर दिया, then registration will become compulsory because it is not required to be taken where he makes only where makes a exempt supply. लेकिन टैक्सेबल सप्लाई थोड़ा भी हो गया और टर्नओवर लिमिट क्रॉस हो गया तो फिर रजिस्ट्रेशन लेना पड़ेगा. ठीक है. नाउ what happens when you take one registration? You may have branches within the state. Okay, then if you have multiple branches in a state, but single registration would be sufficient. आपको हर एक branch का separate registration लेना जरूरी नहीं है within one state. For one state, one registration, 100 branches possible. Okay, and in one state, 100 branches, 100 registration is also possible. So it is not a compulsion that all the branches should get registered. You have an option that if you want, you can take registration within the state. But if you have one registration, you can include all other branches as additional place of business. The PPOB is principal place of business, which is that one registry, one place where it is primarily registered, and additional place of business is all those additional places, all those branches within the state, which will be called as additional place of business. Okay. If a person is having multiple place of business in a state, he may be granted separate registration for each place in the state or union territory. Okay. Now understand this situation. Business 1 is for IT software services. Business 2 is employee training services. Where are both these located? They are located at one common office. So in that case, and see the second scenario, there is one hotel and second is also hotel. He's having two kinds of hotels. One is luxury, one is economical. And the location are in separate locations. So can he take registration, separate registrations in both of these cases? In scenario A, can he take registration, have a separate registration, or whether in scenario 2, he can take a separate registry? Scenario 1, separate registration, and scenario 2, only in situation 2, he can take separate registration. Okay. Why so, Neha Fatima? Why are you saying that? Because of two different places. You're right. Additional place of business can be added. Yes. In second scenario, saying common registration. Situation A, separate registration. A, single registration. B, separate registration. Okay. C, you have to understand and read through the important lines. I've underlined and bolded this word, wherein if a person is having multiple place of business in a state, he may be granted separate registration for each place of business in the state. Okay. Here it is common place. So why will he get separate registration in this case is not possible. Why not possible? Since both of it are located at a common office. Since the business is operating from a common location, it cannot be. In second scenario, even though hotel is the same business, but it is there at a separate location. Separate register in that case will be possible since business are located at different locations. Okay, so the place, the location is very important. It depends on supplier's choice. He may take separate registration. Yeah, that's right, Pooja, that he has a choice. But in first scenario, even if he plans to have two registration, he cannot because they are both at a common office. That is the driving point which I want to drive here. And in second scenario, even though two registration is possible, he has still an option to take only one registration. That is also possible. But in first scenario, he does not have an option. He cannot take two separate registrations. He will have to take one registration itself because the place of business is at one place. There are two businesses. You're right. There are two businesses, but still, he cannot take multiple. The person is having multiple places of business in a state. He may be granted. He should be having multiple place of business. Here, the place of business is one itself. The location, what I mentioned, is common office. So in one common office, he cannot take multiple registrations. That is not possible. Have you understood this, Pooja? Okay, not yet clear. See, the registration, clear this. What does the requirement for separate registration tell is if a person is having multiple places of business, underline this word, if a person is having multiple places of in business in a state, he may be granted separate registration for each place of business. Okay, which means if he is having multiple places of business, only then he will be granted separate registration. From one place, if he is having multiple businesses, then he will not get multiple registration for that single place. He should be having multiple places. In our scenario, business one and business two is of one taxable person itself, and both of it is having a common office, which means it is not having multiple place of business, it is one place of business. In this scenario, separate registration will not be possible. That is what you are trying to say. Got it? Okay. These are the sections for the registrations. It starts from 22 to 30. We'll not spend time on this. You could go through. Important sections are 22, registration, compulsory registration 24, 23 is persons not liable to register. These are the important ones. Section 22 says that every supplier of goods or services or both is required to obtain registration. Okay. In the state or union territory from where he is making a taxable supply. So if I am making a taxable supply from Karnataka, okay, and I am supplying it to Andhra Pradesh. I'm supplying to Andhra Pradesh. I have been having a registration in Karnataka. Now I'm supplying to Andhra Pradesh. So should I take registration in Andhra Pradesh? Because Section 22 says that in the state or union territory from where he's making a taxable supply. So should I register in Andhra Pradesh also? Question is, I am in Karnataka. I have registered in Karnataka and I'm paying taxes in Karnataka. Now I've got a customer who is from Andhra Pradesh. I have to supply him in Andhra Pradesh. Okay. And these are special goods where my attention is required. So I will go and install the products there in Andhra Pradesh. So my question is, should I take registration in Andhra Pradesh or no? No, sir, not compulsory. Okay. Yes, sir. Somebody's saying yes, somebody's no. No, because he's supplying from Karnataka. Okay. Mixed answers. So interstate compulsory registration. You're right. Interstate compulsory registration is there. But my question is, I've already registered in Karnataka. Okay. Should I register in Hyderabad where I will supply the goods? That is my question. No. Okay. Now you got it. So if I supply in another state, I don't have to take registration in that state because I am not supplying from that state. Okay. I have to take registration in the state from where I'm supplying. I'm supplying from Karnataka. I can distribute it anywhere. That's why this IGST is there, right? From where I am making a taxable supply, I have to take registration here. And as rightly said by Pooja, that if I'm doing interstate, definitely I have to take registration. There is a compulsory registration requirement. So I have registered in Karnataka. I will charge IGST and supply it. Okay. I don't have to register wherever my customers are located. They can locate there. I can be located here. I will charge IGST and create a supply there. If is aggregate turnover, section 22 says that supplier has to get registered if the aggregate turnover is exceeding the specified threshold limit. What is this aggregate turnover? It includes value of outward supplies of taxable supplies, exempt supplies, exports, interstate supplies. All kinds of supply has to be added. Taxable supplies within the state, exempt supplies within the state, exports, any kind of interstate supplies of persons having the same PAN be computed on all India basis. So for one PAN, whatever turnover is there, everything has to get included. What it excludes the taxes, the CGST, SGST, all the tax will not be included in the turnover because they are on top of in addition to the taxable supplies. So taxes are not to be included in the aggregate turnover. And on reverse charge also what we pay, that is the value of inward supplies on which tax is payable under reverse charge. This also is not to be added, even though we pay GST on that, but that is not a part of your aggregate turnover. Just supplying in AP and installing your business in AP, supplying and installing. Installation is one part of the supply in installer. So even though I've installed there, I don't have to register there because I'm just going there for installation, but supply is happening from Karnataka itself. So I don't have to take a registration. SEZ supplies, yes. SEZ supply also will be included. Supplies to SEZ also will be included in this. Aggregate turnover, if it is more than 20 lakhs and 10 lakhs for special category states, then registration is required generally. Then we'll see exceptions, but the law as such gives the limit of 20 lakhs and 10 lakhs. 20 lakhs for all states and 10 lakhs for special category states. Who are the special category states? TNMM, Tripura, Nagaland, Mizoram, Manipur. These four are the special category states. We'll come to the proper chart. Now let's take the scenarios and understand. Dayanand Sagar is providing legal services to Azim Premji Private Limited for rupees 30 lakhs. Now, this will be included in whose turnover and who will pay the tax. So the answer is right there. It will be included in the aggregate turnover of Dayanand Sagar because he is making the supply, but tax will be paid by Azim Premji Private Limited because tax on legal services is payable by the recipient under reverse charge. So tax will be paid by Azim Premji Private Limited, but it will be included in the aggregate turnover of the supplier itself. Aggregate turnover excludes CGST, SGST, and all kinds of taxes. Now, there is something called as a TCS under income tax. What does it say? It is called as tax collected at source, which means that when I am selling some scrap, there is a list of TCS items or category of goods on which TCS is payable. Scrap items is one. So when I sell any kind of a scrap, okay, I have to charge GST fine and I have to charge something called as a TCS. I have to collect income tax from him. Why? Because the person who is buying it, he is not organized. He is not in a position to deduct TDS, right? So if he is not in a position to deduct TDS, I have to collect TCS on these specific goods, scrap being one of them. So when I sell scrap, I am selling it and I'm collecting TCS. Now this TCS is not any kind of a GST. So the question was raised that you said that only GST has to be excluded in calculating aggregate turnover. So will this TCS be added? Then there was a circular which says that TCS is not in the nature of tax. It is only an interim levy and it does not have the character of a tax. You're collecting taxes in advance so that it can be claimed by the recipient. That's why TCS need not be added. That's a clarification which has come. Then value of exported goods or services, exempted goods, interstate supply between distinct persons is also to be included. What is a distinct person? Distinct person is a person who is having the same PAN but having a registration in a different state. Okay, or person, and that is one kind of a scenario wherein you are registered in one state and having a branch office outside the state. Now, whether that branch is registered, it can be registered or not registered. If there is any transaction between branches in one state to another state, then it is a transaction between distinct person. And within the state, so one state, another state, we understood. Second kind of distinct person is within the state, you're having one PAN, but you're having two registrations. They are also treated as distinct persons. But what is the impact of this? If you are having any distinct person, okay, then any kind of transactions which you do, you know this branch accounting concept, right? When I supply to branch, it is sale for me, purchase for the branch. Is there any P&L impact on this? Am I making profit on this transaction? No, I am not making because I am selling and my branch is receiving. And when I do the accounts consolidatedly, it will get offset. Correct? Sale by head office, purchase by branch office, both will offset. Correct? So in profit and loss account, it will not show as purchase, not as a sale. Both will get offset. But if this scenario is there between two distinct persons, then GST is payable. GST is payable by the supplier and the receiver can claim the credit. Understood this distinct person meaning? Nishtala, no. In the first scenario, Dayanand Sagar will not reduce the RCM. Dayanand Sagar will add it as his aggregate turnover. Okay. You understood, right? What happens in case of a distinct person. So whatever appears in P&L account, on that only will pay GST. No, that is not the case because these transactions will not appear in your P&L account. On that also GST is paid. Now, if I have 10 branches within Karnataka and I've taken one registration for all the businesses, I will file one GST return. So I've taken one GST registration. So any kind of a branch transfer between one branch to another branch, is it liable to GST? Yes, liable. Any other answers? Correct. So few people have given correct answers saying that no, sir, only separate registration GST is applicable. Same GST number cannot make supply. Correct. So when I said distinct person, if you have branches in one state and another state, they are distinct persons. And within the state, it will be distinct persons only if they are having separate registrations. If you have multiple branches and one GST number, then they are not distinct person. So any kind of branch transfer you do, that is permitted without any impact of GST because they are not distinct person. GST on distinct person only is applicable. Who are not distinct person, then within the same branch, within the same PAN, within the same entity, having one registration, GST is not required. Okay. Turnover on own account or on account of the principal is to be included in the agent's hand. Okay, whenever an agent does anything on the principal's basis, it has to be included in the agent's hand itself. And aggregate turnover versus turnover in a state. Aggregate turnover is the total turnover. Turnover in a state is the transaction what you do in one state. The following supplies will not be included as this turnover. Who is a job worker? You need to understand what happens in a scenario of a transfer through delivery run. You're right, Unikrishnan. So within branch, if you are having one GST number, then you will not charge GST. So any kind of stock transfer will happen through a document called as a delivery challan. Because any movement, even though GST is not there, any movement of goods should be through a valid document. So in such scenario, you will do it through a delivery challan. So in case of a job worker, who is a job worker? A person who does kind of a small work. Say he could do a painting, he could do a kind of drilling of a bigger product. So he will take some goods, do some job working on that, and return it back to the main manufacturer. Because manufacturers sometimes possible that he does not have the manpower or he does not have the tools, so he will give it to someone else. Now this person will be an expert in doing this activity. He's called a job worker. Now what happens in case of a job worker? I will transfer the goods to him, he will do some activity and give it back to me. So that goods still becomes my part. It is not his goods. So it will not form his turnover. The following supplies will not be included as his turnover. Whatever goods I send him, that is my supply, my movement. Okay, that is also not a supply because I'm giving him under job working. Now when he returns back to me, so much goods are moving from his factory, right? But that will not be his turnover because he's only returning back the goods to the principal. So there are the person who gives goods to the job worker is called as a principal, and the person who does it is called as a job worker. So movement happens from principal to a job worker. Okay. So goods move from principal to a job worker, and job worker, when he returns back, this is not his turnover. And goods, sometimes I may say, take this, do one part of the job work, give it to another part to another job worker, then it will come back to me. So when he transfers the goods from one job worker to another job worker, that also is not his turnover. And sometimes I say that, okay, you do this final packing activity. After packing, it will be dispatched from your premises only to my customer. So is it sale of the job worker? Again, no. Any goods directly supplied from his premises on behalf of the principal, okay, from his premises by the principal, is also not included in his job work charges. तो फिर जॉब वर्क का टर्नओवर में इंक्लूड क्या होगा? सब कुछ हमने बोल दिया है कि इंक्लूड नहीं होगा. Then what will be included in the turnover of job worker? Unikrishnan, for issue of credit note, individual invoice reference now is not required, and the time limit for credit note is still the same by the November of the subsequent month. By September, you should issue it, and by November of the subsequent months, you have to subsequent year you will have to report it. व्हाट डू यू मीन बाय जॉब वर्कर? जॉब वर्कर वो है जो छोटा काम करता है, जॉब वर्किंग मतलब कुछ वर्क करता है ऑन अ टेम्पररी बेसिस कि एक काम आपको करना है, दिस जॉब यू हैव टू डू, दैट्स व्हाई इट्स कॉल्ड एज अ जॉब वर्कर. Correct. Services rendered. So what will be taxable? Services, what is rendered by the job worker, वो जो उसका service charges लेगा, that will be the only thing which will be available as a credit to him, which will be available as his turnover. Raw material purchase will be included? Nahi. Raw material, what he purchase, he will not have, right? Because all the materials are mine. He will only do some minor consumables he will purchase. What he is supplying and what he is getting a consideration, he is getting a consideration of the job worker charges, which will be his turnover. Kavita Shah, I missed earlier classes. My query is regarding taxable supply for goods and services, but this is for offline business, while come to online business, how it works, whether it's compulsory or register. Can you please elaborate your question? We can take up because we are talking about registration and we are also talking about taxable supply. So you could just elaborate your question, please. For ITC, 30th November, last date, GST 3B to be filed on 20th of November for October returns. So how it will be 30th November. So to claim ITC, it is not based on the September's return or the October's return. You're saying that in your GST 3B, you will declare the input tax credit, what you have claimed for the last year. So generally, if I purchase something, I will claim it in this month itself. If I have mistaken, I can claim it in the next month. So you have time limit for April of the beginning of the year to claim it till March also. Correct? Any month you can claim. If you claim it in the same month, then the return data will match with your GSTR 2B data. If you file it next month, there'll be a mismatch. So you can claim it any month. Now you have time limit to claim up till March. Now any credit which is purchases which are made in March and it is not appearing in 2B, you have time till October's return to include it in that month's return. Ideally, you should have included it in March. If you have not included, you can include it up till the October's return. Condition is it should all be filed before 30th November. If job worker not return goods within 180 days, then it would be included as turnover. Yes, that's right. So if the job worker doesn't return, then it will be included in his turnover. So that's an exception. Yeah, Ms. Kavita, the question is, as limit for registration is 40 lakhs for goods, but a person whose turnover is less than the limit, not necessary to register. But when a person has to do online business turnover less than 40, then what will be the scenario? So when you do any transaction through e-commerce operator, we'll come to the scenario where this 40 lakh turn limit does not apply. So if you're doing any transaction online by your own website, that's fine. But if you do any kind of a interstate transaction, so if you sell, you're doing online, definitely the idea is to do interstate transactions also, right? So you can do it online. So when you're doing anything online, if your goods are moving interstate, then you will have to compulsory register. And if you're doing through e-commerce also, then also you have to compulsory register. So if you're doing any business online, you will have to take a compulsory registration before you touch the threshold limit also. Time limit for return is 1 year or 6 months. What you're saying return, the normal GST returns are your sales returns. पेज नंबर 8.79 क्वेश्चन को बता दीजिए, ठीक है। कौन से चैप्टर में तनु? Registration या ITC? ITC 8.79, ठीक है। कौन सा वाला क्वेश्चन? Okay. So I think you're asking for Dua and Company question, right? Dua and Company made a outward interstate supply of 80 lakhs in the month of March. Okay. During the month, it purchased raw material worth 70 lakhs and procured cement of 5 lakhs for making foundation and structural support to a plant and machinery. Assuming that the opening balance of ITC for IGST for the relevant period is 2 lakhs, and all inward and outward supplies undertaken in the month of March are interstate. Compute the amount of net IGST payable in cash, if any, for the month of March. Rate of GST applicable is 18%, subject to information given about all the other conditions necessary for availing ITC has been availed. तो क्या बोलना है? In this case, you will have to identify what is the GST liability payable. What is your calculation saying? 80 lakhs is the outward supply, right? And purchases, because it's the same rate, so I can reduce the purchases value, 70 lakhs, correct? And I can also reduce the cement purchase, because why I'm purchasing the cement? For making foundation and structural support to a plant and machinery. So that is also available as a credit. $80 minus $70 minus 5, so 5 की 5 बचे, 5 के ऊपर आपको कितना भरना है? 18% is 90,000. और आपके पास क्रेडिट है 2 लाख रुपीस, करेक्ट? आपको पे करना है 90,000 और आपका क्रेडिट है 2 लाख, तो आपका पेएबल कितना आएगा? 0. You will not have any payable because you have credit of 2 lakh rupees. क्लियर है? आंसर क्या बोलता है इसमें? Okay, another question of Unikrishnan is ITC on fire extinguishers attached on factory building, CCTV camera on factory building and admin building, separate control room, electric for plant and machinery, not capitalized in books and capitalized in books. ITC available or not? So all of this are not whether capitalized or not. Okay, so if it is capitalized, still you will get the credit. Not capitalized, still you will get the credit. The test to see is not capitalization. Capitalization comes only in cases where you have a scenario claiming ITC and you are selling it. That time capitalization comes. Now, these products, what you have said, they are not under block credits and they are not anything which is attached to the earth. they are all movable property itself, right? When you vacate your factory, still you can use them. So that's why these are all claimable, whether you're capitalized or not. Okay, answer है 14,400. ऐसा क्यों आ रहा है? Right. $80 lakhs, 18% of that is 14,40,000. Correct? 14,40,000 है. Input सब claim कर दिया, ठीक है. But what they are trying to do, Neha, thanks for answering that. The question is how much he will pay taxes in cash. He has credit, but can he claim 100% credit? He cannot, right? Because Rule 86B says if you are making any supply which crosses 50 lakhs, then he has to pay 1% in cash. Correct? 1% of your output has to be paid in cash. 80 lakhs का 18% आ रहा है 14,40,000. उसका 1% है 14,400. That's why he will pay 14,400 in cash. So what mistake I have done? I think you would have done the same mistake, but corrected here. I also make myself corrected that you 86B rule kicks in and he has to pay 1% in cash. समझ गए तनु क्यों 14,400 आ रहा है? For all 1% limit, yeah. So in this scenario, they have not given the exceptions, right? If they give those exceptions when the director has paid 1 lakh more or more of income tax, they have claimed refund more than 1 lakh rupees. When those scenarios are there, then it will not apply. In this case, they have not given it. So we'll assume that those scenarios are not applicable. So 1% limit will be applicable wherever you have a tax payable of more than, you have turnover more than 50 lakh rupees. So only Krishna, it doesn't apply in all cases, it applies in only those cases where your taxable supply exceeds 50 lakh rupees. PSU also there's an exception. We'll have to see the exception list. I think PSU is also one part of the exception. Okay. Let's proceed in terms of a threshold calculation. Threshold limit is 20 lakhs for the financial year and 20 lakhs with reduced to 10 lakhs in case of special category state. What is the effect? Effect is if a company has a branch in Mizoram and Kerala, okay, what will be the impact? Because in Mizoram, the limit is 10 lakhs and in Kerala, the limit is 20 lakhs. If you have a company which is having a branch in Mizoram and Kerala, the threshold limit will overall come down to non-TNMM states also. Special category states, if you have, the limit will get reduced in other states also. Okay, that is the impact of having a branch in a special category state. And now there was a notification which said that the limit from 20 lakhs will become 40 lakhs who are in exclusive supply of goods. But then the following persons cannot opt for this benefit. Who are they? Persons who are covered under compulsory registration. If you are having a requirement of compulsory registration under section 24, then you cannot apply this threshold limit. Supplier of ice cream, pan masala, tobacco, and tobacco substitute products, you cannot get this limit. Or if you're supplying fly ash bricks, bricks of fossil meal, building bricks, earthen or roofing tiles, still you will not get it. Persons who are opted for voluntary registration or any person who intends to continue that, he will also not get this threshold limit. Then persons who are engaged in intrastate supply in 10 states, that is in effect 6 states. We'll come to that state list later. They will not get this benefit. Okay. So a person who's have to take compulsory registration, for him threshold will not limit. Threshold limit will not apply. Suppliers of the specific products will not apply. And person who's applied already for voluntary registration, for them also will not apply. Now this threshold we can understand in different ways because some states said 10 lakhs, some states said 20 lakhs, some states said 40 lakhs. So there are 3 limits now. States with threshold limit of 10 lakhs for both goods and services. So TNMM state specifically, this special category state said, we will limit, we'll keep less and we want more registration. So keep 10 lakh for both goods and services. Okay. Then threshold with 20 lakhs for both goods and services. First is 10 lakhs, second is 20 lakhs, third is 2040. Okay. 20 for both goods and services is Arunachal Pradesh, Meghalaya, Sikkim, Uttar Pradesh, Puducherry, Telangana. So 4 plus 6 is what I was referring in the previous slide. So 4 states, 10 lakh rupees. 6 states, 10 and 20. All other states, 20 and 40. 20 lakh for service turnover and 40 lakhs for turnover of goods. Okay. Specifically, they've said Jammu and Kashmir, Assam, Himachal Pradesh because they are also special category states. That's why they have a special name. Who will get the benefit of 40 lakh rupees? A person who's only supplying goods, he will get the benefit of 40 lakh rupees and he is not in those 10 states. हाँ, assume तो करना पड़ेगा तनु उस क्वेश्चन में बिकॉज कुछ नहीं दिया गया है तो हम वैसे नहीं बोल सकते तो कुछ भी नहीं दिया है मतलब वी हैव टू अज्यूम कि वो लिमिट्स अप्लीकेबल नहीं है या वो एक्सेप्शंस अप्लीकेबल नहीं है अगर वो एक्सेप्शंस होते तो फिर क्वेश्चंस में ही दे देते करेक्ट तो करेक्ट आंसर ए ही होगा what happened to the balance of ITC जो balance है it will get carry forward okay that will get carry forward is it necessary to issue GST TDS certificate once it available with GST available with user login GST TDS certificate yeah it is compulsory to be issued got these limits just go through these limits we'll take a break now and we'll catch in 10 minutes in the meantime if you have any questions on these limits please let Thank you. Kerala, okay, so there was a question during the break. Kerala supplier is only engaged in goods supplying to Karnataka. Okay, is only engaged in doing interstate supply. Okay, once interstate supply is there, then this threshold itself will not apply. Okay, anyways, considering if that is not there, if he's doing only supply to Karnataka, whether 40 lakhs limit will apply? Yes. So if he's dealing only in goods, then 40 lakhs will apply to. एक्सेप्शन में जो लोन डिपॉजिट वाला पॉइंट है उसे हिंदी में एक्सप्लेन करेंगे, वो आगे आएगा। हाँ, ये वाला ठीक है। जो हम एनुअल टर्नओवर, एग्रीगेट टर्नओवर कंसिडर करेंगे, एग्रीगेट टर्नओवर में सभी तरह के टर्नओवर्स आ जाएंगे, करेक्ट। तो इंटरेस्ट भी एक तरह का टर्नओवर ही है, क्योंकि इट इज ऑल्सो अ सप्लाई, जिसके लिए आपको इंटरेस्ट के थ्रू इनकम मिल रहा है। लेकिन इंटरेस्ट को एग्जेम्पशन दिया गया है, ठीक है, उसको एक एग्जेम्पशन के थ्रू उसको नॉन टैक्सेबल कहा गया है। ऐसा नहीं कि वो एग्जेम्प्टेड ही है, उसको एक अलग नोटिफिकेशन दिया गया है जिसके थ्रू आपको इंटरेस्ट के ऊपर जीएसटी पे करने की जरूरत नहीं है। तो वो एक्सेप्शन वहां पे दिया है, लेकिन एग्जाम टर्नओवर तो हम एग्रीगेट टर्नओवर में इंक्लूड करते हैं। तो इसीलिए इस एग्रीगेट टर्नओवर के डेफिनेशन में ही लिखा गया है कि इवन इफ इज एंगेज्ड इन exempt supply of services provided by way of extending deposits, loans, in so far as the consideration is represented by way of interest or discount. तो अगर कोई उसके पास लोन है, किसी को लोन देता है, ठीक है, और वो किसी से इंटरेस्ट इनकम लेता है, देन वो इंटरेस्ट इनकम इंक्लूड नहीं होगा, ठीक है। तो इन केसेस में उनको इनकम इंक्लूड नहीं होगा। एंड उन्नीशंकर, यू आर आस्किंग अबाउट 40 lakhs, this is for person exclusively engaged in intra-state supply. So if he is making any interstate supply, then definitely 40 lakhs will not apply. From day rupee 1 he will have to pay the taxes. लोन अमाउंट तो इंक्लूड नहीं होगा ना, बिकॉज लोन इज नॉट अ सप्लाई। द कंसिडरेशन फॉर लोन इज अ सप्लाई, बट लोन तो कंसिडरेशन नहीं है। लोन इज अ ट्रांजैक्शन इन मनी। आप किसी को लोन देते हो, उसे आप सप्लाई नहीं कहोगे, बिकॉज दैट इज ओनली अ गिविंग सम अमाउंट एंड गेटिंग दैट मनी बैक, राइट। अब जब बैंक में आप डिपॉजिट करते हो, बैंक से विड्रॉ करते हो, तो आप क्या उसे आप सप्लाई कहोगे? नहीं ना, दिस इज अ ट्रांजैक्शन इन मनी. Similarly, loan is a transaction in money. When you give any loan, you get back interest. That interest is a supply, and that loan is not a supply. Loan amount will not be included anywhere. Is your point clear, Uni Krishnan? Okay. So we understood these limits. Now let's, okay, this is just saying that where you're making this, we have discussed that the supply registration will happen from the place where you're supplying from and not where you're supplying to. It's too much of theory. Now, in case of a death of a proprietor, what happens? And in case of a amalgamation and demerger, what happens? In case of a death of a proprietor, when is the effective date of transfer of business? On the date of transfer or succession And in case of the amalgamation or in case of any demerger, the date of transfer of business will be the date from which the ROC issues the certificate of registration and not the court order. Because once you have to do amalgamation and things, you have to go to a court. A court will give an order. Will that be considered as the date of transfer? No, because you have to get a new certificate of incorporation. So you will apply to the registrar of companies and then they will issue a new certificate of incorporation. Once they give you that certificate of incorporation, that is the date of transfer of business. Now we are talking under section 34, section 24 about compulsory registration. Who are these people? Persons who is making any interstate taxable supply. If you make any interstate taxable supply from rupee 1, madam also was asking, Miss Kavita Shah, also Uni Krishna was asking that if I do any kind of interstate supply, then you will have to register from rupee 1. Okay. And exceptions to this is if you are doing exception to compulsory registration is taxable services. If you are, there is an exception wherein saying that if you're doing any taxable services, okay, then you still don't have to register if you are having threshold below 20 lakhs. I said no first that any kind of interstate taxable supply, you will have to take compulsory registration from rupee 1. But for services, they gave an exemption saying that if you're making interstate taxable services and your turnover is below 20 lakhs, then still you will get the benefit of no registration. This is only for services, not for goods. Okay. And goods will be for notified handicraft goods. So there are certain notified handicraft goods. If you're dealing in these notified handicraft goods, 20 lakhs for normal states and 10 lakh for special category states, they can still apply only for notified handicraft goods only. And a casual taxable person making any taxable supply. Who is a casual taxable person? A person is in one state. Now he's going to another state for temporary purposes. He is called as a casual taxable purpose and he needs registration in that state. Why will he take a registration in that state temporarily or not permanently? Because his business is only temporary. Say he's gone for a exhibition. He will have to display some goods over there. It will get sold. He will collect GST. If it doesn't get sold, he'll get it back. So whenever some goods are sold during that exhibition, he will have to pay GST. So when he goes there, he cannot say, no, my turnover is not 20 lakhs. I will not take registration because this is a compulsory registration case of casual taxable person. A casual taxable person has to take compulsory registration. Then a person who is required to pay tax under reverse charge mechanism. जिस किसी को भी रिवर्स चार्ज में पे करना पड़ेगा वो थ्रेशोल्ड लिमिट के लिए वेट नहीं करेगा, उसको इमीडिएटली पे करना ही पड़ेगा. सी बोथ क्रिटिकल है ये. सपोज आई एम अ स्मॉल ट्रेडर एंड माय टर्नओवर ऑफ गुड्स में सिर्फ इंट्रास्टेट डील करता हूँ. माय टर्नओवर इज 30 lakhs. सो आई डोंट हैव टू टेक रजिस्ट्रेशन. लेकिन अगर मेरे बिजनेस में कुछ झंझट हो गया देन आई हैव टू टेक सर्विसेज ऑफ एन एडवोकेट. तो अगर मैं लीगल सर्विस लेता हूँ किसी एडवोकेट से, इवन दो माई लिमिट इज बिलो द थ्रेशोल्ड, सिंस मैं एडवोकेट से ले लिया हूँ एंड आई एम अ बिजनेस, तो रिवर्स चार्ज आएगा मुझे. देन आई विल हैव टू सी दैट आई टेक रजिस्ट्रेशन. Once I take registration, any supply I do after this 30 lakhs, on that also I have to pay GST. Understand? So once you take registration, because you are to pay under reverse charge, the implication are twofold. One is आपको reverse charge पे तो GST भरना ही पड़ेगा, उसके लिए आप registration ले रहे हो. Second is that you will have to pay GST on your forward charge also on the regular sales which you are getting that exemption. Okay. नाउ थर्ड कैटेगरी हो गया. देन नॉन रेसिडेंट टैक्सेबल पर्सन. जैसे कैजुअल टैक्सेबल पर्सन एक स्टेट दूसरे स्टेट से जाता है, Non-resident taxable person is coming from outside India. फिरंगी कोई आता है यहाँ पे सेटअप करता है और फिर चला जाएगा, करेक्ट, तो उसको थ्रेशोल्ड लिमिट कुछ नहीं दिया जाता है, आओ टैक्स भरो फिर जाओ। ई कॉमर्स ऑपरेटर, ई कॉमर्स ऑपरेटर के थ्रू आप कुछ सप्लाई करते हो तब भी लिमिट नहीं होगा। हाउएवर सप्लाई ऑफ सर्विसेज, सिर्फ सर्विसेज के लिए एक एक्सेप्शन दिया गया है, ठीक है। देन टीडीएस डिडक्टर, जो टीडीएस डिडक्ट करता है उसको भी इमीडिएटली रजिस्ट्रेशन। एजेंट, इनपुट सर्विस डिस्ट्रीब्यूटर, ऑनलाइन इंफॉर्मेशन डेटाबेस एक्सेस एंड रिट्रीवल सर्विस एंड एनी अदर पर्सन नोटिफाइड बाय गवर्नमेंट। अब तक इन लोगों को कंपलसरी रजिस्ट्रेशन, ये ठीक है, सेम चार्ट आई एम रिपीटिंग योर। पर्सन्स हु आर नॉट लायबल फॉर रजिस्ट्रेशन, we saw 24 में कंपलसरी रजिस्ट्रेशन है, देन 23 बोलता है कि इन लोगों को कंपलसरी रजिस्ट्रेशन की जरूरत नहीं है। हु आर दे? पर्सन्स हु आर एक्सक्लूसिवली एंगेज इन द बिजनेस ऑफ सप्लाई ऑफ गुड्स व्हिच इज नॉट लायबल टू टैक्स, ठीक है। अगर मैं सिर्फ एग्रीकल्चर प्रोड्यूस बेचता हूँ एंड आई एम नॉट डूइंग एनी काइंड ऑफ सेकेंडरी मैन्युफैक्चरिंग, मैं सिर्फ उत्पाद करता हूँ ऑफ ग्रेन्स, राइट, आई एम ओनली अ फार्मर, आई एम ग्रोइंग क्रॉप्स एंड सेलिंग इट, फिर आई एम डूइंग ओनली एग्जेम्प्ट सप्लाई, तो फिर मुझे रजिस्ट्रेशन की जरूरत नहीं पड़ेगी। देन व्हाट आर दीज पेट्रोलियम प्रोडक्ट्स एग्जांपल? सिर्फ पेट्रोल, पेट्रोल इज आउटसाइड जीएसटी, करेक्ट, उसको रजिस्ट्रेशन की जरूरत नहीं है। लेकिन आप जब जाएंगे पेट्रोलियम में, जब जीएसटी नंबर दिखेगा आपको, व्हाई व्हाई डू यू थिंक पेट्रोलियम which is outside the scope of GST still they take registration? On my question, so we were on a point, yeah, crossing threshold limit. Okay. Correct. Petroleum product, even though they do any kind of petroleum, it is not liable to GST, but they sell other products, right? They sell oils, lubricating oils. So these are taxable under GST. So for that purpose, they will have to take registration, not for the purpose of petroleum products. Then charitable trust, whose person is a charitable trust is exclusively engaged. Get seen in the exemption, right? Charitable organizations. If they engage in any supply of books, then they will become liable to GST. Agriculturists, to the extent of supply of produce out of cultivation of land, is not required to register. Definition of agriculturist is an individual or a HUF who undertakes the cultivation of land by own labor or by labor of the family or by servants or wages or hired labor. They are all a agriculturist, matlab, who should do cultivation of their land by own or by labor of the family, or they should be there. They just cannot outsource it to somebody. Okay, so they will have to be the own by their own labor, either by labor of the family or any servants or wages or hired labor. But they should be under the supervision of the members of the family. Who are the specified persons who are otherwise notified by government? Person who is making only RCM supplies, he is not liable for registration. Matlab, if it's a GTA ka services, he is not taken registration and only the recipient has to pay GST under reverse charge. Then he is making only RCM supplies on which tax is payable by the recipient. Even he is not liable for registration, not through the section, because section has power to give category of people by a notification. That's where this notification has come. Person making interstate taxable supply of services up to 20 lakhs. Okay. Person who's making interstate taxable supply of services. This I had said you in the first sentence itself that you're making interstate taxable supply of services. Then also you don't have to take compulsory registration provided you are within the limit of 20 lakhs and 10 lakhs. Interstate supply of notified handicraft products, interstate supply of notified products made by craftsmen, predominantly by hand. One is handicraft groups, and second is craftsmen who is doing any work predominantly by hand. Up to 20 lakhs and 10 lakhs, they should obtain PAN and generate e-way bill anyhow. Matlab, they will have to generate e-way bill. How they will generate? By getting the PAN number, and they will have to generate a e-way bill. What is the e-way bill? We'll come to it later. Then casual taxable person means a person who is going to another state. We discussed casual taxable person NRTP, but exception is if a casual taxable is dealing in only handicraft goods or this groups made by craftsmen, then for him registration will not be compulsory. Commission agent and things we have said. This is same thing. Procedure for registration, fine. Apply the REG 01. So the procedure is same. Okay, apply through REG 01. UIN will be granted, and then okay, now there are separate category of person called UIN, unique identity number. One is we will get a registration number, but special UIN number is given to consulates and officers who are coming from an embassy level and say United Nations want to set up in India. They will need GST number because when we supply to them, it is not an exempt supply, correct? So for that purpose, they will get a UIN number. When we make any supplies to them, they do not make any supplies, right? Because they are only there for any work of the United Nations organization. अब उनको क्या हो जाएगा, जो भी GST हम चार्ज करेंगे उसका क्रेडिट वो ले पाएंगे, इसलिए उनको UIN नंबर दिया जाता है. Then SEZ within the same state. Okay, if you are having a branch in the स्टेट से, आपको तमिलनाडु है, तमिलनाडु के अंदर चेन्नई है, चेन्नई में आपने रजिस्ट्रेशन ले लिया और उसी तमिलनाडु में एक SEZ है, तो फिर फॉर SEZ you have to take separate registration. You cannot tell it is within the same state, even though it is physically within the same state, but SEZ gets special treatment. So for SEZ you have to take a separate registration. कैजुअल टैक्सेबल पर्सन, नॉन रेसिडेंट टैक्सेबल पर्सन, क्या है इनमें देयर इज नो फिक्स प्लेस, तो उनका रजिस्ट्रेशन भी टेम्पररी होगा. दे हैव टू रजिस्टर इन एवरी स्टेट फ्रॉम वेयर दे वांट टू डू बिजनेस. अगर एक एनआरटीपी आता है, नॉन रेसिडेंट टैक्सेबल पर्सन, ही इज डूइंग एनी बिजनेस इन कर्नाटका, that same registration he cannot use in Maharashtra. In Maharashtra, he has to take separate registration. Each and every state where he goes, there they have to take separate registration. CTP and NTP, NRTP, they cannot offer composition levy also. First is उनका threshold limit तो लगेगा ही नहीं, और फिर उनको composition scheme का benefit भी नहीं मिलेगा, and no centralized scheme for both. Okay? Okay, this registration looks like there are no questions from students. Are you all there? Are you paying attention? So that let me know if we have to change the topic, because registration majorly we have covered. We can go to the next topic on invoicing. Time limit. So when you will register, 30 days from when you become liable for registration, you have to register. Like in CTP and NRTP, they will not get that 30 days time limit. They will have to take the registration in advance. Before starting the business, 5 दिन पहले ही उनको registration लेना पड़ेगा, because आपका तो exhibition कल से शुरू हो रहा है, करेक्ट. आप बाद में registration 30 दिन बाद करोगे, तब तक आपका exhibition तो खत्म हो जाएगा, right? So you will have to take registration in advance for a CTP and NRTP. This all we have discussed. Registration process and things. ठीक है. So mostly registration is the major part we have covered. Anything else which is important? Let me just check. The process of registration. Then there is cancellation of registration. When can your registration get cancelled? When you don't follow the rules properly, that time your registration can get cancelled. Now, I think we can go to the next topic. On the tax invoice, credit note, and debit note. That will be interesting. Okay, let's start with the question. Let's share my screen. Now I have made a supply, okay, and I have not raised the invoice. What are the implication of it? Should I pay GST or should I not pay GST when I don't issue an invoice? All my questions are negative, right? Because we need to understand that law are there, law will be followed. But what happens when law is not followed? What happens to the situation of the transaction? Will that situation reverse, saying that, okay, you have not raised an invoice for the supply, so no GST payable? Is it possible? Why is the invoice so very important? We have seen the time of supply, right? In that, we have seen that invoice, if it is raised within time, okay, then the time of supply is this. If it is issued late, then the time of supply goes back to the date of provision of service. So why is the tax invoice so important? If I don't issue a tax invoice, do you think the transaction fails and I fail to pay the GST? Or is there any other implication you can think of? Any guesses? If you not process limit, then it's possible. Time of supply will attract invoice date or taxable event happens, whichever is earlier. If invoice is not issued, bill of supply will be issued. Tax has to be paid on it. No, bill of supply you will do when you do a composition deduct because you're not collecting taxes, right? That's why you will issue a bill of supply. Now, if you have not issued any document, you have made a supply, okay? Then what is the implication? Supply is completed, but invoice is not raised. That is my question. Okay. What will be the implication when an invoice is not raised under GST is it's a supply, right? Supply is happened, so GST will be payable, correct? Interest has to be paid. No, interest, you have paid taxes also on time. You have just not raised an invoice. Invoice is important for evaluating time and value of supply, and place of supply has to be decided, right? For exempted goods, bill of supply can be issued. Yes. If invoice is not issued, bill of supply will be issued. No. Okay. So what you're all trying to say is invoice is important. You have to issue invoice. I always come with a negative approach to ask you what happens when invoice is not issued itself. Can it be treated that no supply happened? No, that can't be the case. It will be treated as supply has happened. But what happens is when you raise an invoice, you can collect taxes from the customer. GST will be payable irrespective of you are raising invoice or no, because the time of supply says you will have to raise an invoice when your goods are moved. Now your goods are moved, so tax will still be payable. You will not get any leeway. But if invoice is raised, then you have a right to collect the taxes from your customer. It's a commercial instrument issued by a supplier to a recipient. Okay. Then, since it is most accepted commercial in all businesses, that's why invoices has become a document based on which time of supply is dependent. Okay. Under GST law, Section 31 mandates issue of invoice or bill of supply, and it's an essential document to the recipient to claim input tax credit. So if he's paid you and you have collected and paid it to the government, correct? But he should get the credit. Will he get the credit? No, because in section 16(2), one of the conditions is the essential document avail ITC is this invoice. If this invoice is there, then he can claim the credit. And there is no format which is prescribed under law for invoice. It says that only these contents should be there. If the important contents are there, that is fine. Format could be of your own anytime. So legally, we have to raise an invoice. That is right. But if invoice is not raised, you cannot escape from the liability. You cannot claim, plead any kind of a exemption there. What are the time limit for issuance of invoice? What we had discussed there, where there is taxable supply of goods and where the supply involves movement of goods, or where the supply does not involve movement of goods. Where the supply involves movement of goods, before removal of the goods, you should raise an invoice. And in case of other than movement, delivery of the goods or making the goods available, before that you have to raise the invoice. And in case of taxable supply of services, your time limit is there that you have to raise an invoice within 30 days from the date of supply of service and within 45 days in case of an insurance banking company or NBFC. And for an insurance banking company and NBFC, taxable supplies between distinct persons, it is recording in the supplier's book before the expiry of the quarter. So this is the time when invoice has to be raised. Number of days is only applicable in case of services, but in goods is actual removal of goods only. Okay, let's proceed. Continuous supply of goods we have understood. Time limit for continuous supply of goods is where there is successive payments or statement of accounts are involved. Then before the time of each such statement is issued or payment is received. Okay. Continuous supply of goods, the time of issue of invoices where there are successive payments involved or there is successive statement of accounts is involved. Then at the time before such statement is issued or payment is received. In case of continuous supply of services, where the due date of payment is ascertainable from the contract on or before that due date. When the due date of payment is not ascertainable, then the supply where the supplier service receives the payment and where the payment is linked to completion of some stages or some events, then before completion of that event, you have to raise an invoice. This is only in case of a continuous supply of services. For normal services, that earlier time limit of 30 days will apply. But in case of a supply of continuous supply of services, this limit will apply. With whether HSN is necessary on invoice, yes. Up to 4 digit, up to 2 digit. Number of digits varies, but mentioning HSN number in your invoice and reporting both are compulsory. And the time limit for issuance of invoice on goods sent on approval basis, we have covered all of this, right? We have covered under time of supply. So we are only doing a revision of that. Time of supply of goods sent on approval basis, the time limit will be 6 months from the date of removal or date when the buyer approves, whichever is earlier. So any goods which you take on approval, you have to raise a invoice within 6 months. And if the receiver has approved it before 6 months itself, then that will be the time when you will raise the invoice. Particulars of tax invoice you've seen, and these are the minimum requirements. HSN digits. How much HSN is required? When your turnover is up to 5 crores, then 4 digits. And if your turnover exceeds 5 crores, then 6 digits is required. And when you're doing B2C, of course, 4 digits is optional, but for clarity purpose, have that when your turnover is up to 5 crores, 4 digits, above 5 crores, 6 digits has to be mentioned. What is this 4 digits, 6 digits? Generally, a HSN code is a 8-digit code. Okay, it is not a small digit code, it's a 8-digit code. It's there in your Customs Tariff Act, which is universal across the world. So to go and begin and find out the 4 digits becomes very difficult. That's why government has given relaxation, saying that if not 8 digits, at least mention 4 digits of the HSN code. The first 4 digits of the HSN code has to be mentioned. And 6 digits when it is a big turnover. When your turnover is crossing 5 crores, mention 6 digits. How many invoices you have to raise? You have to raise triplicate, that is in 3 when it is for goods, and duplicate when it is for services. When can you raise an invoice and revise it if you have found some mistake in it? Can you raise a revised invoice? Demand of interest under 73 is waived off by the recent GST Council. That's true, Nikrishnan. As of now, it is only disclosed in the 53rd GST Council meeting. No notification or any kind of action has come in. So for now, as of now, we don't see any conditions which is applicable. So it will apply to everyone, provided that you have got a notice or an order or something like that, and you have not discharged. If you have discharged already with interest, then now you cannot get any kind of a escape. You cannot get a refund of back of the interest paid. What is gone is gone. So when it will apply is only when you have an open notice or an open order and you have not discharged, then it will be applicable. One minute. Okay. So who can issue a revised tax invoice? If I made any mistake, I cannot make correction of it by issuing a revised tax invoice. There is no concept of revised tax invoice. But in only one scenario, revised tax invoice is possible. Every registered person who has been granted registration with effect from a date earlier than the date of issuance of the certificate of registration. Okay. Now he is applied for registration on time. When he applies, he will not get it today itself. If he's applied today, it will take time to get the registration. So when he's applied and he's got the registration, there is a time gap, right? Now, during that process, whatever sales he make, he will have to charge GST. He will charge GST, but the recipient cannot get the credit because in that invoice, GST registration number is not there, correct? So in such scenario, he can issue a revised invoice. Only in such scenario where he is applied for registration, not got the registration, then he can revise the invoice. Such invoice shall be issued against the commercial invoice already issued during that period. In all other scenarios, if there's any corrections which is to be made, then such corrections cannot be made in the invoice. If there's any correction, you will have to rectify your GSTR1 or your GSTR3. Okay. Pooja Gupta, what is your question? Very odd. Is there any other reason why you're asking such question? Okay. Then revised invoice has to be issued within 1 month from the date of issuance of certificate of registration. A registered person may issue a consolidated revised invoice. Instead of sending one invoice, he can issue a consolidated revised invoice. But if it is to an unregistered person, if it is a registered person, each invoice is important. If it is to an unregistered person, he can issue a consolidated revised invoice. However, in case of interstate supplies, a consolidated revised tax invoice cannot be issued in respect of this. Okay, that's fine. Non-issue of tax invoice, a registered person may not issue a tax invoice when value of the goods are less than 200 rupees or the recipient is unregistered and the recipient is not demanding invoice. Was 200 rupees, don't ask me invoice. And if he's an unregistered person, don't issue an invoice. But if the person is asking, no, I need an invoice, then you have to give it to him. Instead, such registered, because when he supplies, he has to raise an invoice, right? So invoice has to be raised. GST reporting will be there, tax has to be paid. But immediately he will not give an invoice to the recipient. He will give a consolidated tax invoice and report it at the close of each day. Say he's a hotelier and he's having a lot of sales. Okay. There, if he's supplying all to unregistered person only, there if it doesn't invoice also, it's fine, provided he takes up a consolidated tax invoice from the system. None of the sales should get missed out. Okay. So sales cannot get missed out. He will have to report it on a consolidated basis. Pooja Gupta, what do you think? What is the answer for your question? Okay. Then bill of supply. A registered person who is supplying exempted goods or services or who is paying tax under composition levy. Okay. A person who is supplying exempted goods or services or paying tax under composition levy, this person can issue a bill of supply instead of a tax invoice. Important thing, invoice come bill of supply when supplying both to a URD person. When you are supplying both taxable goods and exempted goods, you can give one document called as invoice come bill of supply. But when you're supplying it to an unregistered person, because if you're supplying it to a registered person, then you have to give separate itself. Tax invoice separate, bill of supply separate. Okay, receipt voucher is also there. When is a receipt voucher available? When a registered person, when you receive any advance, then you have to give a receipt voucher for that. Okay. When you're receiving any advance, you have to issue a receipt voucher. Refund voucher, when you're refunding this receipt, then you have to give a refund voucher. Payment voucher, okay, when you're taking any services from an unregistered person, you have to make payment to anybody. Registered person ke liye, so he will give you tax invoice. But if you are buying from any person on which you have to pay reverse charge, they will give a payment voucher. In case of reverse charge invoice and payment voucher has to be issued. So when you supply to somebody, you will raise an invoice, but on reverse charge, supplying it to yourself, right? In that scenario, what you will do, you will raise invoice on yourself also. On reverse charge basis, you will raise a invoice on yourself also. Okay, that's the important part. Where recipient is registered, receives the supply, and taxable on reverse charge basis. Under 9.3, supplier is registered or unregistered. In both scenarios, you will pay under reverse charge. Under 9.4, only when supplier is unregistered, then you will pay reverse charge, and then you will issue a payment voucher. Okay, so only in this scenarios, you will issue a payment voucher. Now, 9.3 and 9.4 are both under reverse charge, but 9.3, when the supplier is registered, he will issue an invoice because he is registered. So you don't have to raise a self invoice. But if the supplier is unregistered, then you will have to raise a self invoice. And in 9.4, it is always an unregistered person itself. That 9.4 we have discussed, no? Where under a contractor, a builder, if he's procuring from unregistered person, he will have to pay under reverse charge based on that 80-20 ratio. Remember, in such scenarios, when your procurement is less, okay, is very less, then you will have to pay reverse charge. Who issues refund voucher? Yeah. So when you receive any payment, then you will issue a receipt voucher. And when you refund this money back, you will issue a refund voucher. Any document other than tax invoice can be issued. That is, the GST law gives an exception saying that in certain scenarios, you can give any document other than a tax invoice. Now, what could that document be? In case of a GTA, he can give a other document which has these major characteristics, or they should have these information. And an insurance company or a financial institution can give any other document which should have these information. GTA supplier is registered, but GST remitted under reverse charge mechanism. In that case, recipient has to issue invoice. See, that is the why this slide is relevant. Invoice and payment voucher. Payment voucher is different and invoice is different. In case of a GTA, you will always give a payment voucher because you're paying under reverse charge. Now, when it comes to invoice, if the GTA is registered, then you do not have to raise a self invoice. That invoice of the GTA becomes a document to pay GST under reverse charge basis. Supplementary invoice, yes. I will come to that. It is, I think, next. That is called as debit note or supplementary invoice, delivery challan, GTA. Okay, that is not mentioned here. So there is nothing called as a supplementary invoice. It is also called as a debit note. So when you supply something and there is a mistake in it, then you will increase the value, right? For the differential, so 1 lakh rupees I had to raise. I have mistakenly raised an invoice for 90,000. Now, for that mistake of 10,000, I can give you a supplementary invoice, or it is called as a debit note. For increase in value, I will give a debit note. For reduction in value, I should have raised 1 lakh, but I've raised 1 lakh 10,000. So you will ask me, refund me the amount. For that 10,000 reduction, I will give you a credit note. So debit note or supplementary invoice is for addition in the value, and for decrease in the value, I have to give you a credit note. In that case, how can I avail invoice ITC? Unikrishnan, in case of if you see Rule 36, it gives you document basis on which you can claim input tax credit. So if it's a registered person, his invoice will become a document. And when you are paying RCM, that invoice and the reverse charge taxes what you pay, right? The challan through which you pay your reverse charge, those two will become the document basis which you can claim your input tax credit. No problem at all. Good. I'm seeing very good questions being asked. So let us, for the next few moments, instead of discussing, let us discuss on your questions. ठीक है. Delivery challan is a document for movement of the goods. So when you, Pooja, if you have any question, you can ask, or can you mute yourself?
सर
Yes, yes.
मुझे मुझे ये जानना था सर कि जैसे इफ आई परचेज समथिंग देन जैसे सेलर होता है वो बिल देता है, तो परचेज का बिल क्यों बनाते हैं सर?
सॉरी, फिर से बोलिए.
सर जैसे कोई भी चीज हम परचेज करते हैं तो हमें बिल सेलर देता है, वो बिल
करेक्ट.
सेल मतलब सेल का होता है, जैसे सेलर जो बिल देता है, तो परचेज बिल किस लिए बनाते हैं? जैसे परचेज बिल क्यों, मतलब
परचेज
उसका
बिल
क्या
नहीं
यूज
बनाते
होता
हैं,
है?
सेल्फ इनवॉइस बोलते हैं उसको. क्या? सेल्फ इनवॉइस, नॉट परचेज इनवॉइस. परचेज इनवॉइस नहीं है, वो सेल्फ इनवॉइस है. जैसे आप, मेरे ख्याल से आप इस स्लाइड के बारे में बोल रहे हो, जहाँ पे हमने कहा कि रिसिपिएंट शैल इश्यू इनवॉइस. आप इसका बोल रहे हो ना?
यस सर.
करेक्ट. तो जीएसटी में रिवर्स चार्ज मैकेनिज्म आपको पता है कि जब रिसिपिएंट पे करता है सप्लायर को, सप्लायर चार्ज नहीं करेगा जीएसटी, रिसीवर जीएसटी पे करेगा, जिसे हम आरसीएम बोलते हैं. करेक्ट. अब
यस सर.
आरसीएम जो पेमेंट करेंगे हम, उसके लिए कुछ बेसिस होना चाहिए डॉक्यूमेंट का. करेक्ट. और ये जब अनरजिस्टर्ड पर्सन है, वो इनवॉइस देगा या नहीं देगा उसका कोई कंट्रोल नहीं है जीएसटी में. कोई दे भी सकता है, कोई नहीं भी देगा, लेकिन पेमेंट तो आपने को करना ही है. करेक्ट.
यस सर.
तो फिर that document of an unregistered person cannot be a document जो लाइटली आपको क्रेडिट मिलेगा, क्योंकि वो जो डॉक्यूमेंट देगा वो रूल्स के हिसाब से नहीं होगा. तो इसीलिए जब भी आप अनरजिस्टर्ड पर्सन से परचेज करते हो या सर्विस रिसीव करते हो जिसके ऊपर आपको आरसीएम पे करके क्रेडिट भी लेना है, तो इस केसेस में आपको खुद का इनवॉइस रेज करना पड़ेगा. ये इनवॉइस और आप जो आरसीएम पेमेंट करोगे, ये दोनों बेसिस हो जाएगा आपको क्रेडिट लेने के लिए।
तो जितने भी
सेक्शन
मतलब परचेज के बिल होते हैं वो सभी इसीलिए इशू किए जाते हैं क्योंकि उसके ऊपर आरसीएम के थ्रू मतलब हमें टैक्स पे करना है।
हर सभी इनवॉइसेस नहीं, सिर्फ वो इनवॉइसेस जिनके ऊपर आपको आरसीएम का क्रेडिट लेना है। जैसे कि मैं बताता हूं, हर गुड्स के परचेज में आरसीएम नहीं लगता है। ठीक है। जब आप टोबैको प्रोडक्ट्स लेते हो तब आरसीएम लगता है, क्योंकि जो टोबैको प्रोड्यूस करने वाले होते हैं वो अनरजिस्टर्ड होते हैं। तो
जी।
वो नोटिफिकेशन कहता है कि आप जब टोबैको प्रोडक्ट्स खरीदोगे तब आपको सेल्फ इनवॉइस रेस करके क्रेडिट क्लेम करना है। तो उस जगह पे आपको सेल्फ इनवॉइस रेस करना पड़ेगा। लेकिन मोस्टली सर्विसेज के केस में देखोगे आप, जब आपका जीटीए रजिस्टर्ड है तब वो इनवॉइस रेस करना है, तो उस केस में इनवॉइस रेस करने की जरूरत नहीं है। लेकिन अगर जीटीए अनरजिस्टर्ड है, एडवोकेट अनरजिस्टर्ड है, ठीक है, तब
जी।
आपको सेल्फ इनवॉइस रेस करके जीएसटी पे करके क्रेडिट लेना है।
ओके सर। सर जैसे कि आपने लोन का बताया कि इंटरेस्ट वाला, उसमें सर डिपॉजिट भी दिया हुआ है, तो डिपॉजिट में तो एक्स्ट्रा कुछ जाता ही नहीं है। डिपॉजिट तो मतलब सप्लाई होगा, उसमें एक्सटेंडेड डिपॉजिट भी लिखा हुआ है सर।
करेक्ट, डिपॉजिट सप्लाई नहीं है, क्योंकि डिपॉजिट का मतलब है आप डिपॉजिट कर रहे हो। और
एडवांस डिपॉजिट दोनों चीज दिया हुआ है उसमें,
करेक्ट,
एडवांस डिपॉजिट लोन।
करेक्ट। तो हम जब किसी को लोन देते हैं, उसको अलग अलग नाम से भी कहा जाता है कि आई गिव डिपॉजिट। जैसे मुझे कंपनी से कुछ खरीदना है, ठीक है, कंपनी बोलता है मैं तुझे जानता नहीं हूं, तुझे 2 लाख रुपए का डिपॉजिट देना पड़ेगा। तब मैं निगोशिएट करूंगा, डिपॉजिट तो दूंगा बट यू हैव टू गिव मी इंटरेस्ट फॉर इट, क्योंकि मैं तो मेरे ट्रस्ट फैक्टर के लिए दे रहा हूं तुमको डिपॉजिट, तो तुम मुझे इंटरेस्ट दो। ठीक है। या फिर मैं एडवांस कुछ दे रहा हूं और उसकी वजह से मुझे कुछ गुड्स मिल रहे हैं, मैं जैसे आपके ऊपर ऑर्डर प्लेस कर रहा हूं, आपने कहा ठीक है मैं आपका सप्लाई फुलफिल कर लूंगा, लेकिन मुझे एडवांस चाहिए। ठीक है, एडवांस चाहिए इसको प्रोक्योर करने के लिए, मेरे को रॉ मटेरियल्स प्रोक्योर करना है। तो इस एडवांस जो मैं दे रहा हूं, मैं बोलूंगा आपको एडवांस तो मैं बड़ा दे दूंगा लेकिन मुझे इंटरेस्ट चाहिए। तो ये जो भी अमाउंट मैं एडवांस दे रहा हूँ, डिपॉजिट दे रहा हूँ या लोन दे रहा हूँ, डिपॉजिट पे भी इंटरेस्ट होता है, एडवांस पे भी इंटरेस्ट नेगोशिएट कर सकते हैं। तो इन सब पेमेंट्स जो मैं ट्रांजैक्शन इन मनी कंसिडरेशन नहीं है, ये ट्रांजैक्शन इन मनी है, बिकॉज ये सप्लाई के डायरेक्टली रिलेटेड नहीं है। एडवांस एक हो सकता है लेकिन लोन और डिपॉजिट तो सप्लाई के रिलेटेड नहीं है। तो इनके इस अमाउंट की वजह जो आप इंटरेस्ट दोगे, उसे मैं उसका मुझे एग्जेम्पशन है और मैं इसको एग्रीगेट टर्नओवर में कंसिडर नहीं करूंगा।
ओके सर। सर मुझे ये भी जानना था, जैसे आपने बताया कि ये मतलब अगर अलग अलग बिजनेस हो, सेम ऑफिस हो, तो भी हमें एक ही रजिस्ट्रेशन लेना होगा।
करेक्ट, एक ही बिजनेस लोकेशन हो तो आपको एक ही लेना पड़ेगा।
ओके सर।
उसमें स्पेसिफिकली लिखा है कि डिफरेंट बिजनेस लोकेशन, एक लोकेशन पे आपको दो रजिस्ट्रेशन नहीं मिलेगा।
तो सर क्या ऐसा हो सकता है कि हम सेम ऑफिस पे जैसे अलग अलग उसका काम। ठीक है सर, ठीक है।
हाँ, एक ही ऑफिस में आप अलग अलग काम कर सकते हो, रिटर्न्स आपका कंसोलिडेटेड जाएगा।
ओके।
Can you refer to the section which talks about non-generation of self-generated invoice in case of registered supplier GST payment? So section 31, Purni Krishnan, if you read section 31, you'll get that clarity. Tax invoice, section 31, 3F and G. 31, 3F and G, if you read. A registered person who is liable to pay tax under 93 or 94 shall issue an invoice in respect of goods or services or both received by him from the supplier who is not registered on the date of receipt of goods. And a registered person who is liable to pay tax under 93 or 94 shall issue a payment voucher. So 31(3)(f), if you read, they are specifically saying that a registered person who is liable to pay tax under 93 or 94 shall issue an invoice in respect of goods or services received by him from the supplier who is not registered. That makes it clear that if the supplier is registered, you do not have to raise a self-invoice. And your other question is 43rd Council also talks about self-generated invoice has to be considered for availing ITC. Correct. Always you consider ITC based on your self-generated invoice itself. But what that council had clarified is not that. The council has clarified what will be the time limit to be considered. Is it the date of the supplier or the date of receiver? Since 31(3)(f) says that a receiver has to raise an invoice, the time limit to claim the credit will start from the date of raising self-generated invoice. That is what that council meeting is clarifying. Clear with your queries? Invoice, TK, contents of the invoice, debit note and credit note. The credit note where one or more tax invoice have been issued, and if the taxable invoice is higher than the taxable value, or the tax charge is higher, or when the goods supplied are returned back, or when the goods are deficient, then you will have to give a credit note. And credit note is always issued by a supplier. Like how in our accounting terminology, we said that supplier issues a debit note, I will issue a credit note to offset. That concept is not to be mixed here. Debit note and credit note both will be issued only by the supplier. If the value is increasing, he is mentioned low value, you have to bring it up, then you will give a debit note. When the value has to be brought down, then you will issue a credit note. This is not allowed for secondary discount. Matlab, those discounts, okay, which is not permitted, they and debit note is reverse. Debit note shall include supplementary invoice. Time limit for credit note. Time limit for the credit note is 30th November following the end of the financial year or the date of furnishing annual return, whichever is earlier. For debit note, government ko the taxes mil raha hai, so that's why there is no time limit for debit note. Okay. Any other queries? Because I don't think there are any other important pointers to be discussed here. Then you have the procedural aspects of e-invoicing and e-waybill. Those are the things. What is e-invoicing? That's that your invoice has to get tracked online, updated. That's why there is a system of e-invoicing. And e-waybill is to track the movement of goods, saying that whether you have moved the goods properly or no, that's why you will generate a e-waybill. So e-waybill is for all movement of goods, and e-invoicing is for keeping your invoice tracked live. So you have e-invoicing. Discount given through commercial credit note without reducing GST. Can a recipient avail entire IRTC of GST once he is making payment net? Yes, still he can make it because supplier is not reducing his taxes. So recipient also can claim full credit. He need not reduce anything even though he's paying less amount, because that's a commercial agreement between the supplier and recipient. GST is not involved there. When semi-completely knockdown conditions arise, when you have to install bigger equipments, a bigger machinery, like you have to transport a lift, then you cannot transport it in one shot. You will transport it in blocks, right? Parts of the lift will be in one, equipment wiring will be in different transition, different consignments. Then it is called as a semi-knockdown condition. Invoice has to be raised when the first tranche itself is removed. First truck is removed, you have to raise the invoice, but credit and for other trucks, you will keep a copy of it and mention that this is 1 of 2, 2 of 2, 3 of 3. And recipient can claim the credit only when the last lot is received. But recipient is not paying entire amount. So that's fine, because that's a commercial agreement which is agreed and you're not supposed to pay. So you can claim the credit even in such scenario. Okay. So we'll see you on Monday and we'll discuss the further chapters. Monday, our thing is payment of taxes, TDS and TCS returns.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, madam. Yes, sir.